Today we are tackling the second part of finding better Irish whiskeys available on the shelf. Last time we talked about blended Irish whiskeys better than Jameson, but there are 3 more categories to tackle, including single malt, single pot still, and single grain. Today it's single malts. That's right, they aren't just for Scotland. Let's find some available Irish single malt hitters today on What's on the Shelf Wednesday. Welcome to What's on the Shelf Wednesday. I'm Jason C, and this is the series where I bring you quick reviews of whiskeys that you can actually find on the shelf, including bourbons, rye, scotches, and Irish whiskeys and more. So what's on the shelf today? Part 2 in our look at the 4 types of delicious and available Irish whiskeys. Single malts. Take a closer look at these selections before we dive in. All right, so first up, the rules for single malt Irish whiskey are the same that govern single malt Scotch. The whiskey must be made of 100% malted barley from one distillery in Ireland, aged for at least 3 years in oak barrels, and bottled at 40% ABV or higher. Now, single malt Irish whiskey, for the most part, is also double distilled, as opposed to the traditional Irish triple distillation. But as we'll see today, there are a mix of ones that are triple distilled and ones that are double distilled. First one up is this sexy looking bottle. It's a great budget entry into Irish single malt, created by Alex Thomas, one of the few female master blenders in the industry. The Sexton, as it's called, is made from 100% Irish malted barley and is triple distilled, so this is one of those that is still triple distilled, for smoothness in copper pot stills and aged in European oak and former sherry casks. There's no age statement on the bottle. It's supposedly aged 4 to 5 years. It's also non-chill filtered, bottled at 80 proof, and distilled by Bushmills. And you could pretty much find this for about, I don't know, 30 bucks. So pretty good price on this one. Now, the biggest standout feature of the bottle is the bottle. It's got this black, you see this, it's got a black hexagonal shape to it. But as cool as the bottle looks, it does have a notorious reputation for being a messy pour no matter what you do, especially fresh out of the bottle. So let's see how much I spill here. Oh yeah, that's a mess. Okay, let's try that again. All right, so the rumors are true. It's a mess. So on the nose, there's a lot of dried fruit going on in here, and you definitely pick up the amount of single malt of that maltiness that's in this is definitely prevalent. Man, it's very citrus forward. I get apricots, lemon. Yeah, the maltiness definitely shines too. It's a delicious entry into single malt Irish whiskey. Let's give it a go. I mean, even though you're only looking at 80 proof or 40% ABV, there's a nice texture to this whiskey. Again, it's non-chill filtered, and it just goes to show you what a difference that can make to a whiskey. This still has some really nice texture to it. It's bringing a lot of good flavors. Again, I would say the nose matches the palate here. Apricot, a little bit of lemon zest. You get all that maltiness. Definitely some fruit flavors, picking up a little bit of raisin, maybe even a hint of chocolate there. What's also interesting on this bottle is there's a little skeleton on top wearing a top hat. Not sure what that means, but makes it a pretty cool looking bottle. Obviously, aside from the issue of this bottle and pouring it, it's a great entry into single malt. It's generally pretty damn available. So if you guys haven't ventured into the single malt category of Irish whiskey, the Sexton is a great place to start. All right, here's the next great one. And we're talking Turkanel. That's right. I'm gonna pour this, let it get a little air. So the legend of the Turkanel was born in 1876 when R.M. Delamere entered his chestnut colt, Turkanel, a beautiful racehorse, in the prestigious National Produce Stakes horse race. Now, Turkanel won in a surprise victory which captured the imagination of the crowd, which included A.A. Watt, who was a local distiller. Now, he chose to commemorate the occasion by creating a limited edition small batch whiskey named after Turkanel. Now, Mr. Watt intended to make the Turkanel just once, and it ended up becoming his most popular whiskey. So before Prohibition, the Turkanel was claimed to be the best-selling Irish whiskey. Today, the brand is maintained by the Kilbeggan Distilling Company, proud protectors of Irish whiskey making traditions. Now, the Turkanel is on the double distillation side of the fence here. This is double distilled, it's a single malt. Double distillation helps retain the character of the grain while creating delicate flavor and creamy and more texture to the whiskey. So we'll test that out. This is bottled at 43% ABV, so you get a little bit of an uptick. Retails for about 45 bucks. They also have a lot of finished versions of these that are available. including I think a sherry, a port. So there's some really nice finishes that go along with just the standard single malt. So let's try it. Man, this is just classic, just honey, like heather, honey, a little bit of like a biscuit, like bread, like some Irish soda bread, like baked in here. I don't know if I mentioned, this is aged in ex-bourbon cask, so you get a lot of the vanilla caramel flavors that come through here as well. Really classic sweetness, very sweet Irish whiskey notes, but again, kind of going hand in hand with that maltiness. Let's try it on the palate. This is good. This is a little bit heavier on the palate than even the Sexton was. Even though you're only going 3% up in ABV, I think the double distillation rather than triple distillation, it leaves some of that heft into the whiskey, gives you a little bit more viscosity to it. You get all the classic Irish whiskey notes here. You get the honey, you get the, again, kind of like that biscuit, like vanilla cookie, like Nilla wafer almost in here. Caramel, vanilla, a little bit of spice on the back end. I think you get a nice little finish on this as well. The finish doesn't disappear overly quickly. Again, I think that double distillation helps. Yeah, I like the heft of this whiskey. There's a chewiness to it, and it's extremely mouth coating for a whiskey that's only 43% ABV. So, yeah, Turkanel single malt Irish whiskey. Again, you could get it for about 45 bucks. Absolute hitter of an Irish whiskey, just sitting there on the shelf. So the next bottle I want to talk about, it kind of goes against what's on the shelf Wednesday is, because I was going, and I know it's available here where I live here in Ohio, but I could not find a bottle in any of the stores I went to, unfortunately. But it is carried, and I have seen it a lot. And it's a brand that we spoke about on the last video with blended whiskeys, and that's Bushmills. In the world of Irish whiskey, Bushmills is the world's oldest licensed whiskey distillery since 1608. I mean, just crazy history. Now, while I love that sherry finished blend, the 10-year single malt offering that I've had before might be even better. Now, the 10 year is the youngest of Bushmills single malts. They also have a 16 and a 21-year-old. The Bushmills single malt whiskey 10-year-old is triple distilled, so now we're back to triple distillation. 100% malted barley and matured for a minimum of 10 years in former sherry casks and bourbon seasoned casks. Now, this is a personal favorite of master blender Helen Mulholland. At 40% ABV, it's light, sweet, great intro into Irish single malts, and retails for only about 48 bucks. Now, for that whiskey, what I could tell you, and again, I don't have the bottle, but I felt like I needed to mention it. That bottle has now aside from the proof, I wish it did have a little bit of a higher proof to it, but the mix of flavors you get between the sherry and the bourbon, and if you guys watch my channel, you know I love the mix of sherry and bourbon casks, and that Bushmills has it. It's got like this really nice tropical fruit flavor to it, a little chocolatey as well from the sherry. Then you get your vanilla, you get a lot of fruit flavors in it. It's very balanced. If you could find it near you for that price, I mean, a minimum of 10 years old. Bushmills is a little bit known for putting some older whiskey in there. So for that price, a nice single malt, a nice Irish entry into the single malt experience, look for the Bushmills 10 year. It's an absolute great addition to the shelf. All right, and lastly, my fourth and final selection today goes to Teeling. Now, I've done videos on the Teeling single malt stuff or the single grain. Actually, the whole lineup I did an episode for. You guys can look for that one. But Teeling, now the beginning of Teeling goes as far back as 1782. Walter Teeling set up a small craft distillery on Marrowbone Lane in the industrial heart of Dublin City. Eventually, the Teeling distillery was purchased by a larger neighboring operation, none other than William Jameson and Company, which was also based on Marrowbone Street. However, William Jameson's distillery, run by relatives of the more famous John Jameson, later closed in 1923, having encountered serious financial difficulties in the early 20th century. Now, in 1987, John Teeling, a descendant of Walter Teeling, purchased a facility in Cooley County, Louth, which had previously been set up by the Irish Free State government to produce industrial alcohol from potatoes. Teeling converted this plant to a whiskey distillery, reopening it in 1989 as a Cooley distillery. The distillery was the first new distillery to launch in Ireland following the consolidations and closures of the 20th century. John Teeling's two sons, Jack and Stephen, worked with their father at Cooley Distillery. It was sold to none other than Beam Incorporated, now Beam Suntory, in 2011. Not that long ago. But as part of the sale, the Teelings were smart and they negotiated the purchase of 16,000 casks of aged whiskey that was laid down at the Cooley Distillery. Using these stocks, Jack Teeling launched Teeling Whiskey in 2012 and was later joined in the venture by his brother Stephen. In 2015, the Teelings established a new Teeling distillery in Newmarket Square in Dublin's South Inner City, not far from the location of the original distillery on Marrowbone Lane. Now, the Teeling Single Malt is made with Irish whiskeys distilled from 100% malted barley, matured and finished in casks that impart the influence of 5 wine casks. All right, a lot going on in this bottle. Sherry, Port, Madeira, White Burgundy, and Cabernet Sauvignon. Yeah, like I said, a lot going on. This is bottled at 46% ABV and it's non-chill filtered like all Teelings. That's kind of an important detail that people seem to miss about Teeling. All of their offerings, aside from the single cask strength varieties, are all 46% ABV and also non-chill filtered, which I think really makes them stand out. This particular single malt retails for about 60 bucks, so let's give it a go. So this for me just brings a ton of like tropical fruit and lemon. I get a ton of lemon on this. It's almost like a lemon meringue pie, but like drizzled with chocolate on top. Apricots, a lot of vanilla. You get some of like the dark, rich, like the dried fruits, maybe like a fig or a raisin in there as well. Again, that mixture of different casks I feel like can give a lot of you a lot of different, you know, notes that you could pick up from this depending on what you're picking up from those 5 different casks that this is matured in. Yeah, but I think for me the standout is like lemon shortbread biscuit, lemon curd, all that, all the lemons. All right. Now when you taste it, I mean, you get a burst of all those flavors that I mentioned on the nose. The lemon, the fig, raisin, a little bit of chocolate, a lot of vanilla too. Once that hits mid-palate and it carries on, that's where all the traditional Irish whiskey and the maltiness comes through. Again, 46% ABV, non-chill filtered. This, like the Turkanel, has a little bit of a heft to it. There's a creaminess to it, a really beautiful texture. I think I'm starting to pick up some of the white burgundy, the wine influence on the palate here too a little bit. It's very sweet, but again, the spiciness of this and the way you actually get a really nice finish on this one is what makes this my favorite of the ones that I mentioned today. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of What's on the Shelf Wednesdays. We looked at single malt Irish whiskeys, one of the 4 categories we're gonna be looking at. So we've already done blends, we've done single malts, still left is single grain and the ever popular single pot still categories. We'll be diving into those pretty soon. So if you liked the video, hit the subscribe button below. Please hit the like button. If you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Let me know if you've had any of these. Again, the Bushmills 10 single malt, I couldn't find, unfortunately, but it's definitely one to add as well. So definitely don't forget about that one. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. So cheers, and yeah, give these a go. They're really, really good. Cheers.